Hi, everybody. Thanks for listening. Welcome to the AFSA Extra Credit Podcast, joined today by Tyler Gray, Director of Sales with LCT. Hi, Tyler. How are you?
Hey, folks. How we doing?
We're doing great over on these parts. So interesting topic today, and one of the more complex topics that I think we deal with in consumer finance. We were just talking before we pushed the record button here, and we both agree compliance, not the sexiest topic on the planet. So we're going to do our best to try to make it interesting and a little bit snappy and relevant. And you can't see this, folks, but Tyler nodding his head emphatically to agree. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So Tyler, give us a little bit of what we're talking about today. We're talking specifically about voluntary protection products, which are a credibly important part of our consumers and the American consumers' financial toolbox in many instances. But give us a little bit of a preview about it, define the term and let's get into it a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So voluntary protection products, ancillary protection products, rebatables, GAP, vehicle service contracts, maintenance, tire wheel, dent and ding. These are going to be those protection products that are extended to consumers when they're buying vehicles over at the dealership to help protect them against those, specific, risks that come with owning a vehicle. So obviously, most lenders are very, very aware of these products. The thing that kind of gets confusing with them is what you call them. And again, there's a lot of names for them. But generally speaking, voluntary protection products, ancillary protection products, rebatables, we're all talking about the same thing there. So,
Nice.
And they are incredibly important in the financial toolkit of the consumers. They protect consumers. They're very, very valuable to consumers, and they're great for all the parties involved, for the lender, for the dealer, and for the product provider that provides the services.
Yeah, and all of those pieces kind of have to fit together for the consumer to get the most out of the product. And one of the things, my colleague Philip and I just recorded our Philip and Dan Buy Their Own Cars podcast. We just kind of talked about our experiences at the dealership. And one of the things that was most important for us to relay to folks listening is that voluntary protection products are absolutely useful and fantastic, but they are that first word. They are voluntary. Optional products that are offered to the dealer or by the dealer.
That's absolutely right. They are optional, and definitely as we'll kind of get into it with the regulation, we see a lot coming down the mountain on that in terms of disclosures, things like that.
Yeah, so let's dive into that a little bit so we have a little bit of an understanding. What are some of the key issues that we've got at hand here?
Yeah, so just a lot going on in the industry around this today. Really starting about a year and a half, 2 years ago, lenders started getting these inquiries around, their processes in terms of what they're doing with these products when they have a cancellation event, right? So what happens when a consumer pays off a loan early? Is the lender doing anything to make sure that they're getting the proper amounts credited back to them on unearned premiums? Where we're at today, we've really seen that go pretty full bore on the regulatory side. So you got the CFPB, the FTC, the OCC out there really kind of looking at digging into lender processes around this. The CFPB does have these questions as a part of their auto exam manual. And so when they come in and look at that, they actually have specific items in that manual that they're looking at as it relates to cancellations. Then you also have another dimension of that, which is going to be your states. So 50 states, 50 different statutory regulations around that, to include different AGs who will have different appetites for how they want to view these products and how they want to pursue collections and refunds for the consumers. You got some states like Colorado that have been unbelievably aggressive in pursuing it. It seems like almost every few months there's a new settlement being announced out of Colorado. But more importantly, you have California that just recently changed their law last month, and effective next year. January 1 of next year, anyone doing auto lending or indirect auto lending in California is going to be responsible for ensuring that those consumers get the refund. So it's a big change. It's going to have big impact on the market. Southern California in general is a big indirect lending market. So this is a pretty big game changer. And lenders, I think, have woken up to this, and they're really starting to try to put those strategies in place that they need to be successful.
Definitely. And as we know, California does sometimes tend to lead the way for other states to take up issues. You're talking about a whole bunch of federal agencies. You're talking about 50 states. Where do we start? Where do we start with compliance with some of this stuff? What do lenders need to know?
Yeah, I mean, you hit it right on the head, though. California, West Coast, they're going to lead the charge. I think if you're thinking about this practically, that, if you're a lender, you need to be thinking about this is going to be something you're going to have to conform with, regardless of the state that you operate in going forward. So, where you start is understanding your regulatory requirements in the states and the jurisdictions or areas that you operate in, right? That's the most natural place to start. Like I said, a lot of people are waking up to this. A lot of folks are aware that this was a little bit of a thing, but they've never really been exposed to it. So they don't really know what their requirements are. So you got to get your risk team, your legal team involved. You need to be digging into those regulations and understand what your requirements are, and then build your strategy from there. If you operate in one state, maybe you get lucky and the requirements are really light. It's a lot easier to implement that strategy versus you operate in 35 states and multiple states have different requirements around that. So start with the regulations and then identify your path forward from there is definitely the way to start.
Awesome. So after we've kind of sat down and dug in there, how do we get our arms around actually doing the specifics of this, actually doing the nuts and bolts, the everyday of processing refunds, ensuring that we're being compliant with the law in itself?
Yeah, so once you understand the regulatory risks, now you've got to start looking at your internal systems. You always got to start with the data. What data points do you need to facilitate this process? Again, if you don't have this process built out, there's a very high likelihood that the data you need to facilitate this process you may not be tracking today. So you need to find where that data resides. The good news about this voluntary protection product, cancellation, refund piece, it's only about 16 to 20 data points that you need. And those data points lay somewhere in your ecosystem within your LOS or your servicing core. So you have the data. Now you just need to go out there, figure out where all of that data lies and query it up so that you can actually facilitate this process. It is pretty common also that most lenders are not tracking some of these data points. So for example, a key piece of data you need to cancel a product is you need to know who the product provider is. Well, today, when you're originating that loan, you're not really looking, okay, well, I need to know who the product provider is. That's not really important necessarily when you're funding the loan. You're looking at, total amount financed, contract terms, things like that. It's going to be important going forward because if you look at it, dealing with this going forward, you're going to need to know who that provider is. Definitely documenting that at the time of funding if you can. Even if you can't pass that information through to your core, your servicing system, you need to be documenting it, rolling it up to another data warehouse, something like that, where you can query off of it later. So when you have these cancellation events, you're not having to dig through the imaging system and looking at the physical contracts. Looking at the images is one approach, but quite frankly, a lot of these providers also roll up to other administrators and other providers, and so there's a lot of knowledge also that you may need that you only find that out in the fine print at the bottom of the contract. So it may say XYZ Gap, but then you get to page 3 and it says administered by ABC Insurance. Right. And so going out and procuring those refund quotes, you need to make sure you're reaching out to the right parties to save yourself a lot of time and headache. So start with the data, locate the data you need, and then keep pushing forward.
Right. And so here's the question that I think a lot of folks that are listening will be curious about. We're obviously talking with LCT, so we know that LCT offers a great option for this kind of service, which we'll definitely touch on at the end of our conversation here. But are there ways to do this kind of thing in house? Does it work well? What are some of the different strategies that we can kind of think about, for lenders can think about as they start to embark on this?
Yeah, so strategy is going to be based again on kind of all those other things we just talked about: risk and jurisdiction, where you're at, and then data, all of that pieces. There's really 4 different approaches you can take, and this is just technology in general when you're solutioning in general when it comes to this problem. So this is, you start at the bottom of the ladder there, or the staircase, and quite frankly, it's the do nothing option. So you always have to state it. It's not the greatest option in my opinion, but listen, there are small lenders in the country. They operate in one state. They look at the regulatory analysis. They say, look, we have no requirement in this state to do anything. We're just going to watch, and we're going to see what happens. And as our state rolls on new requirements, we'll adhere to them. The problems with that is that retroactively correcting that can be expensive. You can find yourself kind of under a hard deadline, which I think a lot of lenders are finding with California now that California has changed that statute. But it is an option. It's not a great option. Definitely not the one I would suggest you proceed
Yeah,
with,
no,
but it is an option. Okay.
yeah,
Do nothing. I say maybe wait and see would be a better way to categorize that. But
got it.
again, not a great option to lead with. The second, step up that ladder, I would say would definitely be those manual processes internally. So you have a requirement, you need to adhere to them, but you're going to look to solve this internally with the systems that you have. Typically this will entail, multiple systems, multiple stakeholders, people working out of Excel spreadsheets and, trying to pull data from the LOS, pull data from the core. You're going to have a database somewhere with the provider contact information. It can be done. What I would say is your risk of non-compliance, though, is going to be a little bit higher, right? So every time you use more and more systems, more and more people, more and more processes, it's just a likelihood of losing data. And so, definitely for anyone of, medium or large size, manual processes are not going to be the way to go. You have way too much at risk, way too much at stake. With the auditors, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. They tend to want to see the details.
I want to see the paper
And so
trail.
the paper trail, that's right. And so auditing and tracking becomes really difficult, not to mention reporting capabilities as well. So yeah, manual processes. So stepping up one step from there, let's talk about, user developed platforms, lender developed platforms. It's a very viable option. As a lender, you can really bring a lot of efficiencies to this process. You go out there and you look at your current systems, you tie them together into a common system that you've built from the ground up, and you basically manage the whole process from there. You can start to tap into those automation pieces. You can begin to tap into that auditing, tracking, the reporting capabilities, all of that. The considerations for that, quite frankly, that you need to stop and think about as a lender is that this is a niche area of the market. And the subject matter expertise to build out a system like this is very niche as well. There's a lot of pieces. Again, you got 3 stakeholders. So you need to facilitate communication between all 3. You need to track documents. You need to track payments. You need to track what's going on with the cancellation fees, your timelines, all that stuff. It can get pretty messy. So definitely can do that, but it takes the right knowledge set to build it out successfully. Anytime you do a lender developed platform or a user developed platform, you always need to make sure you got the right people in the room. All of us have probably been in the room at one point where we had that meeting that one day, that one person was gone and they didn't ask that one question, and now we got to re-engineer something for $75,000. It gets painful and it makes people angry. So definitely,
Sure.
it makes CFOs angry when you're over budget and over timeline, and you need more. So definitely some considerations there, but it is a viable option. And then going up one more step is obviously, tapping into the vendor base that's out there. Vendors are great for niche areas of the market. Of course, they bring that subject matter expertise. They got the tool, the platform. The caution flags with vendors, obviously their approach, their technology solution has to fit inside of your servicing strategy, your servicing ecosystem, or your LOS, whatever you're doing. That's key. You really need to understand that vendor. That's why you got that whole vendor due diligence process. You need to make sure they're a good fit. Data security is tight, all of that stuff. In this area, there's a lot of outsourcing that goes on as well. So providers don't just give you a great technology platform. They can also shoulder this burden for you. Really important to understand what the nature of that outsourcing looks like. Are they handling all of that in-house? Or are they outsourcing your outsourced services to someone else as well? You need to understand what that relationship looks like. Again, maybe they're outsourcing it to someone that can do it more proficiently, better, and it's going to be a greater value add for you. But you really need to understand that, because the more degrees of separation you get away from managing this yourself, the less control you have over it. So definitely find that single vendor that can do everything in-house for you, push that data back to you, and be a good partner in that as well. So 4 approaches, all along the risk spectrum, all along the technology spectrum, a lot of different ways you can solve it.
Right. And so we're obviously we're talking to you, Tyler, of LCT. So just give us a little bit about what LCT does and how you guys might be able to help with that, specifically that last option, that vendor option.
Yeah, I appreciate the product plug there, by the way.
Sure.
Yeah, so Lender Compliance Technologies, we are a single vendor for this particular process. We don't just give you a platform that gives you full workflow, default preferences, letter templates, everything out of the box ready to go. We are also an outsourcing solution as well. So we can help you consolidate data, manually input data, follow up with your dealers, just a lot that we can do for you in that area. Again, as a niche area of the market, you got more important things to be doing as a lender than chasing down product cancellation quotes. Let us do that for you and get back to customer care, repossession tracking, things like that you need to be doing for sure. So happy to help you if we can.
Fantastic. Awesome. We'll include all the contact info and stuff in the show notes as well. So final thoughts here, Tyler. I wonder if we can just boil it down for folks. What are some considerations maybe specifically for lenders, for dealers, and providers? What do we need to, if they only take one thing from this conversation, what is that thing?
Yeah, so for lenders, get moving. You have got timelines that you got to adhere to. You got regulation coming down the pipe. The nice aspect of this is vendors can get you onboarded pretty quickly. This is it's a complex process, but vendors have simplified it in terms of standing you up. So that's great. That's good. Really get going on that. For the dealers, I would say, they're an important part of this process as well. Get your books in line, get ready. Lenders are going to start wanting remittance on these items, especially in the case where they're maybe proactively refunding consumers because they have a timeline. They're going to be wanting those funds back. If they're not operating on a dealer reserve method, if they're not hitting dealer reserve, they're going to be coming to you. So definitely consolidate the books, get your accounts payable people, oriented, get them squared away. And then, for the product providers, again, kind of like the lenders, get ready, get your house in order because, the non-technological product providers that leverage call centers, they're about to see their call volume go up drastically. So they need to figure out their technology solution. You may only need 5 FTEs to answer cancellation quotes today. Come January, February, March of next year, you're probably going to need 15 because you're going to have thousands of more calls coming in per month. So bridge that technology gap, build a portal, work with APIs, work with providers like us. We'll help you solve that. We'll build it out with you, get you squared away. You actually probably find it's a cost reduction measure in the long run. So it's good. So that's it. Get moving, consolidate the books, and get technological. That's what you got to do.
There you go. And our members and everybody loves cost reduction. That is a good selling point right there.
It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. Tyler, thanks for taking a minute and joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
AFSA hopes you've enjoyed this edition of the Extra Credit Podcast. Don't forget to follow AFSA on Twitter at AFSA_DC and on LinkedIn. Just search for the American Financial Services Association. You can follow AFSA's SGA team on Twitter at AFSA_SGA. The blog at AFSAonline.org is also a great resource for the most up-to-date news. If you've got questions or if you'd like to suggest a guest, please shoot us an email at communications@afsamail.org or tweet at us. Join us next time for more Extra Credit. Thanks for listening.